Okay, guys, so we are going to just finish up the last few slides that we didn't get a chance to get to. And it's just the theories in emotions. And so we talked about emotions all the way up to this point, as well as motivated behavior. We used the example of hunger throughout that, the cultural, psychological, physiological factors, social factors, all involved in hunger and motivated behavior. And then we talked about the basic emotions and how those 6 basic emotions are innate, they're natural, universal. They're not learned. And then we talked about, of course, there are some cultural aspects involved in how we display emotions. And now we're kind of going to the last final things of the theories in how we're able to experience emotion. And so the common sense view is, of course, in terms of emotion, is that you see a threat, there's something in front of you that's scary and threatening, and then you're going to react to that by being scared, okay, which is your subjective experience. And then this is going to activate your sympathetic nervous system, which is going to then trigger your actual feeling of fearful behavior. And so the sympathetic nervous system will have all of those things involved that will make you feel like you are scared. And so this would be sort of the common sense idea. So you see a threat, okay, see a threat, and that's going to lead to this feeling of fearful, right? And then that is going to then lead to activating or triggering your physiological response, which would be, of course, things like, feeling sweaty and scared physiologically. And then that is then going to trigger this fearful behavior. And this right here is going to be the fight or flight. This is going to be what you're going to do in response to that. Are you going to run? Are you going to stay and fight? What are you going to do? And so William James did not believe that this is actually the case. So he didn't believe in the order in which this theory, this common sense view, works. And so that's kind of where we're going to see the differences between these three or four different theories, is the order. Everyone knows that, okay, there's a physiological response, there's a threat, there there's the subjective feeling of fear, like I am scared, right? All of these things are involved, but the argument is which one comes first and which one triggers what. So is it that you feel scared and that is going to trigger the physiological response? Is it the physiological response that allows us to realize we're scared? What's going on here? And so there is some evidence, neurologically speaking, that we that the order is a little bit different than the common sense view, that our autonomic system and the physical arousal actually occurs before the emotion is felt. And so there is some neurological evidence for this, and we won't go into all the details, but I just want to let you know that we do have some evidence for this. Now, the James-Lange theory of emotion is very simple. You perceive a stimulus, there's a physiological and behavioral changes that occur, and then so, for example, in this case, the stimulus is the shadowy figure in a parking lot at night, and he's saying, hey, what's your hurry? And so number one, you perceive the stimulus. Number two is the physiological and behavioral response, which is I'm trembling. Okay, this is my heart rate is increasing, and I'm going to run away. And then the final part of this theory is the feeling I'm scared, I'm afraid. So the subjective experience of emotion, this is the complex feeling of I am scared, comes last. So in this case, we have the stimulus. It's, a threat is detected. And then we see the physiological change and behavioral change, like, heart rate increase, sweating, eyes dilate. And then the behavioral is with that, of course, if I'm running away. And then the final part is that you're actually feeling the emotion. This is the subjective feeling of fear. And so William James and also Lange also, said, hey, this is what is happening. Okay, that the stimulus is leading to the arousal, which leads to the emotion. Okay, and so another example, of course, is, you hear a gunshot, you detect a threat, your heart rate increases, you start sweating, and then you go, I'm getting out of here, and then you experience this sort of quote unquote fear. Is the subjective experience. Now, there's two other theories here that, again, the contradiction is the order in which things are experienced, as well as how you at what point you experience the actual subjective feeling of emotion, in this case, fear. So this is the Schachter and Singer theory, where it's the interaction between the physiological arousal and the cognitive label that we apply to it that explains our arousal. So in this case, I'm going to give you, so this would be, for two-factor theory, this is the stimulus is going to trigger this physiological response, plus at the same time, this is important here, we label it, okay? And then that is going to then lead to our interpretation as fear, okay? And then we are going to, then that will lead to the subjective feeling of I am scared. And so this is what the important part of the two-factor theory is, the fact that it is both the physiological response and the label that we place onto it that is going to then trigger this interpretation. So I'll give you guys an example. A gunshot. You hear a gunshot and you are in, let's say, a firing range. Okay? So you hear a gunshot. That's the stimulus. Then you have a physiological response. Maybe your heart rate goes up, okay? And then you place a label on it. And in this case, the label is not dangerous, okay? And that's because you are in a firing range. And that tells you, okay, I am not going to interpret this as fear, and so I am not scared. Now, let's turn this around and let's say I am not at a firing range. I am walking in a mall. Okay, you hear the stimulus. You determine the stimulus is a gunshot. Your physiological response is your heart rate increases. Now you're placing this cognitive label on this as this might be a danger because my explanation is there shouldn't be gunshots at the mall. So then you're going to interpret this as fear, right here, and then that subjective feeling is I'm scared. So here you're going to run, and here you're like I am scared. Now the cognitive appraisal theory is very similar. This is a very, very similar idea, except again the combination, and it is not in the exact order. The emphasis is on the cognitive appraisal as being the trigger for the emotional response. Okay, not necessarily the physiological response plus the label. Okay, this is the two-factor response here. Now, so here in the case of cognitive appraisal, we have the stimulus, which in this case can be a gunshot, right? And that is going to trigger the arousal. And then at that point, you're going to label the cognition. So this does not happen simultaneously. This is happening in a way that first you experience the arousal, in this case, let's say increase in heart rate. Then you're going to label the cognition, okay? And then you're going to experience the emotion. So in this case, you hear the gunshot, okay? Increase in heart rate. Then you're going to label, is this a threat or not? This is a threat. I'm at the mall. I shouldn't hear this. Then this is going to affect my well-being. I should be scared. And then you're going to say, I'm fearful. And so it's the order and the combination in that is the difference between the two-factor theory and the cognitive appraisal theory. And so that's what's important, is to realize that a lot of these theories are very similar in nature and all have the same elements. It's just a matter of which one is which comes first. Is it the arousal that causes the emotion? Is it the emotion that's experienced first, and then that leads to physiological arousal? What's going on? What's important to also note here is that the physiological arousal for a lot of emotions are actually very similar. And so how is it that we're able to appraise the situation and place a label on it that is appropriate for the situation, for the stimulus, and appropriate for what comes next is the emotion that you're feeling? Because many emotions have the same arousal of increased heart rate, eyes dilating, trembling. You can tremble because you're happy, so you can shake. Your hands can shake because you're so excited. You can shake because you're scared. Your heart rate goes up when you're excited. Your heart rate goes up when you're scared and anxious. And so the idea is that you have to be able to tell the difference between all these different combinations of physiological arousals and be able to place the correct label on what it is that you're feeling. Is it happiness? Is it excitement? Is it fear? Is it anxiety? What are you experiencing? And so all of these theories attempt to say, okay, this is what's going on. But again, it's very difficult to nail down exactly in the order of which you're experiencing without further study. And there's been some fMRI studies on this that seem to confirm some parts of it. But again, this is something that we're still kind of investigating. This last slide here is just a review for you guys. We talked about two major different things here, motivation and emotion. And so I want you guys to use these slides to help you. This is the sort of outline that we talked about in terms of motivation, the characteristics involved in motivation, the theories involved, using hunger and eating as an example of motivation, as well as looking at Maslow and the self-actualization hierarchy of needs. And then here we kind of split it also into emotion, looking at those 6 basic emotions, the functions of them, explain why it is that we experience them, how we experience them in terms of like the amygdala and limbic system, how we express them, how culture is involved with that, and the fact that the 6 basic emotions, expression and identification, are completely innate, universal. And then those 4 theories that we talked about, common sense, the James-Lange theory, and then on that one side, 2-factor and cognitive appraisal theories. So if you have any questions, you know to email me. Make sure you check out the quiz dates for this particular chapter because it is coming up. And if you have any questions, email me, and have a great day.